Hey, welcome to the OMG Tarot podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, aka OMG Tarot. As a follow-up to our discussion about the Wheel of Fortune last week, this week we're talking about the world. Not the actual world. The world that's a tarot card, number 21. The reason why I chose the world to follow up the Wheel of Fortune is because graphically, there are a lot of similarities between these two cards. In both cards, we have a central focal point that's a round object, and in the four corners, we have four figures. In the world, they're disembodied heads, and they are in much closer focus than they were in the Wheel of Fortune. But they're the same characters. We have the angel in the upper left-hand side, the eagle in the upper right-hand corner, the lion in the lower right-hand corner, and the bull in the lower left-hand corner. In both cards, all of the action is not grounded. It's happening up in the sky against a blue background, with clouds behind the four figures in the corners. Centrally, we don't see a wheel like we did on the Wheel of Fortune, but we see a wreath that creates a circle around our central figure, a nude woman draped in a white sheet, and in each hand, she holds a double-sided candle. I'd like to draw your attention to these double-sided candles in her hands because these are the same objects that we see the magician holding. As we discussed in last week's episode, the Wheel of Fortune and the magician have a relationship. The magician is number 1, and the Wheel of Fortune is 10, and when you add up the two digits in 10, 1 plus 0, you get 1. So what does that have to do with the world? Because the world is the one who's holding the same candles that the magician's holding, not the Wheel of Fortune. For me, I'm just pointing this out as a little bit of a reference or an Easter egg to this card that's graphically very similar, and in that series of magician, Wheel of Fortune, the sun. Because in the world, these two candles are a callback for a different reason. And also, side note, a lot of readers see them as batons rather than candles. But I think what's more important is what they're doing with these rather than how you want to refer to them. And they are channeling the energy of bringing the spiritual and the mundane together. They're symbols of mastery of this task. And over in the magician, where we were very early on in the Fool's journey and just getting acquainted with the tools that we'd be using as we progress on that Fool's journey, I see that single one as a knowledge of what he needs to do, even if he's not yet done it. It's an awareness of this is the goal and this is what I'm going to be doing. And then by the world, he's now done it. He's now gone through the cycle and learned all the lessons and grown into a more evolved self. Perhaps an analogy could be that the magician is an undergraduate student who plans on going to medical school and becoming a doctor, but right now he's sitting in his undergrad organic chem class thinking about the why behind why he's learning what he's learning and what he's going to use this knowledge for later on. And then by the world, that same student has now completed med school and started working in the healthcare field and is now a working doctor. They've gone through all of the training and development necessary, and they're now actively doing the thing that just a few years ago they dreamed about doing. So as a big picture note here, that's the world in a nutshell. The World Tarot card is about mastery and completion, and you've gone through all the steps and now you're at your final destination. So how does this tie back to the world's graphical similarity with the Wheel of Fortune? Or perhaps a better question is, does it tie back? I think it does tie back, and I don't think that it's a coincidence that these cards look similar. I think that while the Wheel of Fortune was about navigating the challenges that life throws your way and knowing how to lean in and how to zigzag and how to work with the situations you randomly find yourself in, the world is recognizing that you did all of that, that you got through the challenges and that you have prevailed. Because remember, the Fool's journey goes in order, and if we're reading this as a linear narrative, our Fool, by the time he's reached the world, he's been through it. He died, he fell out of a tower, he basked in the sun, and looking at some of the earlier stages, He built up relationships with his mother and his father and his teachers and a romantic partner, and he drove his chariot and he fought a lion and he analyzed the details until he found his own light within his lantern. And I know I just made references to a couple of cards that are fairly early in the major arcana that we haven't looked at yet, but don't worry, we're going to look at them. By the time we're at the world, the cycle is over. We've reached completion and we're ready for the next challenge that comes our way. Because that's an important thing to note too. The major arcana doesn't exactly end. We see symbolically this wreath wrapped around our central figure, and that symbolizes how the end just leads to the next thing. It leads to the next beginning. And this is a theme that we see quite a lot across the deck. It's basically the overarching theme of death, but it's a theme that we pick up again and again, and we also see it in the minor arcana. So where do we go after the world? We go back to zero, the Fool. Astrologically, the world is associated with the planet Saturn. Now here's a couple of things about Saturn. Saturn was the last of the traditional planets to be discovered, so it has kind of that similar energy of this is completion, this is finishing, this is the end of the line. It's essentially the harvest after a whole season of hard work, pruning, and nurturing your garden. And I'd actually like to explore that symbolism a bit further because I think it makes some really cool inroads in the major arcana. Saturn is the god of the harvest. You might see some classical depictions of Saturn as someone who's holding a bushel of wheat in one hand and a scythe in the other. If this is sounding kind of death card, yes, good observation. I'm actually working on a blog post about that, and once it's posted, I'll let you all know on Instagram. So if you're not following me, give me a follow. My handle is its_OMG_tarot. But putting that aside for a moment, let's take a look at when we reduce down the numbers for the world, what other card do we get? This is number 21, so we add 2 plus 1, and we get 3. The Empress. Now take a look at the Empress. She is fertile, she's abundant, she's surrounded by everything that she's raised and nurtured, and she has so much more love and effort and energy to give. She's prosperity and creative potential, and then over in the world we have the fruits of that potential. It's that creativity existing and being. And perhaps it's all that effort that the Empress put in paying off. But Saturn isn't the planet of abundance and potential. Saturn's kind of the opposite. It's the planet of the harvest and reaping what you've sown, but also this idea of self-discipline and self-reliance and responsibility. Your Saturn return is the point in your life where Saturn has literally cycled through the entire zodiac to get back to the point where it was in your natal chart. And we could do a whole episode about the Saturn return, so I don't want to focus too much on it right now, but just know it's typically associated with a period in someone's life, and we all have a Saturn return, and a lot of us have more than one. It's associated with a period where you essentially level up as an adult and go from being kind of a young adult to someone who's a bit more mature and a bit more self-aware and a bit more ready for the responsibilities that come with being a person who has to participate in society and make decisions and find that path between taking care of yourself as well as being a responsible part of the collective. And I think the world really speaks to this because after you've gone through that whole fool's journey, you yourself are ready for a level up, and you're leveling up with that knowledge and experience that you've acquired and worked into your worldview and your understanding of yourself. So why are the 4 fixed signs, or the symbols of the 4 evangelists, present in the corners of this card? I think it's symbolic of what our main figure has mastered as they've gone through the Fool's journey. Back in the Wheel of Fortune, these were present in their life, and they were the elements that they were working with as they navigate the difficulties that life and our random world throw their way. And then now here, they've continued working with those elements and they've mastered them. If we want to read it the zodiac way, we have one sign from each element. We have Aquarius as our air sign, Scorpio is our water sign, Taurus is our earth sign, and Leo is our fire sign. Or if we want to read it as symbolic of the four evangelists, they're still the different elements and energies that one is working with as they strive to become a better person and grow spiritually. It's symbolic of human nature, which is what we see with the angel, who symbolizes Matthew, and courage and bravery, which is what we see with the lion, who symbolizes Mark, and it's service and sacrifice and all those grounded things that we see in the ox, which represents Luke. And then the eagle represents John and the ability to fly high and look into the sun and really soar further and higher. So, in any case, it's about what you've mastered as you've gone along this journey. And all the way back in The Magician, we saw these tools as literal items on his table. We saw the pentacle, the sword, the wand, and the cup. And I think it's symbolic of the Fool's development that the first time we see these four elements, they're tangible, inanimate objects, and then by the end, they have faces and they have human qualities. They're living and breathing, much like our main character. To gain a little more insight to the world, let's drop it into the major arcana. At number 21, it comes right after Judgment, number 20. In Judgment, we see a big angel tooting a horn over people who look like they're maybe coming out of coffins, maybe they're just boxes, but they're looking upward at the angel as they seem to come alive. Judgment is all about acceptance and peace and recognizing that you've done all that you can do within your power, and now the ball is in another court. Are you going to be validated? Are you going to be kicked while you're down? You've done all that you can do, and now you're waiting for what comes next. Were your efforts good enough? Do you get to advance to the next phase? And in the world, we find out. In the world, we see that completion. The judgment, I always think of judgment as kind of, you've submitted all your documents, and now you're waiting. Did I get approved? Did I get accepted? And it's having to make peace with the fact that you've done all that you can do, and if things don't work out, if you don't get to progress, if you don't get accepted, well, you made your best effort, didn't you? Sometimes that's the silver lining. At least you can take comfort and pride in that. And then, if you get accepted, if things do get approved, well, you're moving on up in the world, and that's where we see the world. So now what comes after the world? We go back to the Fool, and we start a new journey that we might not know what's off the edge of that cliff, but we do know what we've learned in our previous journey and all those previous cycles. And ideally, we're not held back by baggage or unresolved difficulties. So when the world comes up in a tarot card reading, what does it mean? It means completion. It means mastery. It means you've gotten to the finish line and you deserve a pat on the back. You made it. So let's do an example poll. Let's ask our tarot cards the question, now that it's October and we're into the fourth quarter of the year, what can I, a small business owner, expect from this last quarter? So we shuffle, 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 and oh! We've got the World, and we've got the Queen of Pentacles. This is wonderful. So we know that the World is all about completion and having mastered the skills that you've been working on for quite some time, and you're finally seeing them come full circle and reach a point where it feels like things are paying off and you get to take a profit. Then we pair that up with our Queen of Pentacles, which, if you remember back to the Queen's episode, she's the queen who's got a lot of abundance coming her way. She's the one who's grounded and stable and has things paying off for her and nurturing her. She actually has some pretty similar energy to the Empress, and in the Empress episode, we're going to break down how the Empress is a bit different from the Queens because there is some overlap, but they're not exactly the same. So I am reading this combination of cards as you've developed the skills and you've worked your butt off, and now take a profit. Everything is in motion. Enjoy these last couple of months, and the passive income whether that's in the form of literal income or just good things coming your way, that are coming your way as a result of all the hard work you've put in and everything that you've learned and pivoted and retooled and developed. Let's try again. Let's do a 3-card reading this time. Let's ask something a little more open-ended. Tarot cards, I would like to know more about my creative life and the creative projects that I've been working on. Tell me about where they're at right now and give me some insight to maybe what I can do next. So we've shuffled, and bear in mind this isn't a real tarot card reading because we're artificially putting the world into it to illustrate how it works with other cards. But if you were to do this reading and the world came up, here's how I might read it. Interestingly, we've pulled the Chariot and the Queen of Cups. So remembering back to the Chariot episode, that was all about moving forward while you're protecting yourself. There's a lot of themes of setting up shop for your own home and having that hard exterior that you protect yourself with. You're progressing, you're moving forward, and you're safe as you do so. So if I read the Chariot as the first card in our pull, I would say that with regard to your creative life, you're actually going through a period of a lot of progress and a lot of moving forward, and you're kind of insulated from the difficulties. Perhaps you are only doing this as a hobby and you're not relying on it to pay the bills, or perhaps this is your creative skill set that's protecting you as you move forward and explore new things. That skill set is kind of keeping you grounded and keeping you focused on the direction that you've chosen to pursue. Then with the world, we have this sense of mastery and this sense of what are you striving toward? Maybe you're working on your magnum opus here. Maybe you're really striving toward taking your creative life to the next level. Maybe you're going to finally finish a novel or get some of your paintings into a gallery. You're looking very specifically for a level up. You want to go from hobbyist to serious hobbyist, or you want to go from amateur to intermediate. You're basically taking this thing to the next level. And with the Queen of Cups here, I think you're pulling in a lot of emotional energy that way. I think you're making yourself open and making yourself vulnerable. And I think it's a really interesting contrast between how you're, on the one hand, we're starting off this pull with this sense of I'm protected and I'm shielded and I'm moving on up in the world while encased in that protective armor. And then once I've gotten there, I'm making myself more available and making myself more vulnerable. So maybe you're going to see the screenplay that you've been working on for 12 years finally get filmed. And that's kind of raw, and that's kind of exhilarating. That's kind of wonderful. You're showcasing your thoughts and feelings to the world, and to get there, you kind of gotta be tough. I get it. I think that as you're moving forward in the Chariot, that makes it possible to be that Queen of Cups and to be emotionally honest and relatable. So I'm excited to read your novel or see your sculpture or watch your movie or listen to your song because it's clearly important to you and it's clearly a showcase of the skills you've developed. So that about wraps up our discussion of the world today. I hope you learned something, and I know this episode was a tad bit shorter than the last couple of ones have been, and that's because I'm working on a really cool bonus episode that might not release on our normal Thursday schedule. If I can get it out ahead of time, that's the plan. And it's featuring a really, really cool guest star who I think you're going to love. She's totally awesome and really, really smart and really brings a different perspective to tarot than the one that we've been working with in these episodes so far. So absolutely stay tuned for that because I'm excited about it. It's going to be amazing. And then as far as other bonus episodes go, I am still taking submissions for reader horror stories. Halloween is coming up, and I know a bunch of you listening have reader horror stories, whether that's from your perspective as a tarot card reader or from your perspective as a querent. Maybe you've had a horrific experience with a reader, And maybe it was scary, maybe it was silly, maybe it was awkward and non sequitur, and then all of a sudden came full circle not long afterward. So, in any case, I want to hear them because I want to hear more voices from our community featured on the podcast. So, if you've got a good one to share, please do. Head over to omgtarot.com and click on Reader Horror Stories to submit yours. And while you're over on omgtarot.com, give the blog a read, check it out, sign up for the newsletter. And if you want to stay in touch with me via Instagram, just give me a follow over there. It's its_OMG_tarot. So, see you over there. And until next time, have fun with your deck, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.